The greatest slavery is the slavery of the soul. Plato. Before we begin, here's a small ritual. Write in the comments one word that accurately describes your current state. Sign it and let's get started. We are born into a world that whispers the word freedom like a promise, but wraps us in invisible threads from the very start. Family, school, culture, government, all these weave the net around us, shaping our steps before we take the first one. The idea of choice is fed to us like warm milk, soothing and sweet. But by the time we can walk, the path has already been drawn. From the cradle, we are told what is good, what is bad, what is right, and what is wrong. We do not question the rules, because we have never known life without them. A child learns to smile when praised, to cry in secret, to fit into a mold that was built long before they were born. The idea of being yourself becomes a mask of its own, polished to reflect what others expect to see. As we grow, the net tightens. School teaches obedience, not curiosity. It rewards memorization, not wisdom. It shapes the mind to seek approval, to chase grades, trophies, certificates, signs of worth that mean nothing outside the system that created them. A young mind learns early. You are only as good as the number someone else gives you. Then comes the world outside. Media fills our heads with images of success, beauty, strength. We are told what to want, what to fear, what to hate. Ads whisper that happiness is a product away, that love can be bought, that failure is the ultimate sin. We scroll, we watch, we compare, always measuring ourselves against a mirror polished by others. Social media becomes a stage where we perform, carefully curating the image of a life we think we should have. We smile wider, travel farther, work harder, all to keep up with a world that watches and judges without mercy. And all the while, the invisible threads tighten, pulling us towards sameness, toward a life where we no longer know where our desires end and the system's demands begin. The cruelest part is the illusion of choice. We believe we choose our careers, our partners, our dreams. But these choices are shaped by what we are told to value. The system does not need to lock us in cages. It only needs to convince us that the cage is a palace. That is the genius of invisible control. Freedom, then, is not the absence of chains, but the ability to see them. To notice the way fear shapes decisions, the way comfort kills rebellion, the way we trade authenticity for approval. And until that moment comes, until the veil is lifted, we walk through life as prisoners calling themselves free. The journey to freedom does not begin with escape. It begins with recognition. To know the walls is to know the way out. To feel the weight of the invisible chains is to begin the work of breaking them. That is the first awakening, the quiet, brutal understanding that the life we live is not fully ours. We are born into a world that scripts our lines before we speak, but somewhere along the way, pause. They stop mid-sentence, hear the echo of a voice that is not theirs, and begin to ask, whose life am I living? That moment, that fracture, is where the story of freedom begins. From the very first breath, we are handed a script, not one written on paper, but one woven into the air around us, into the voices we hear, the hands that hold us, the eyes that watch us. The family shapes the first layer. We are taught to be good, to be polite, to fit in. Good means obedient, polite means silent, and fitting in means carving away the sharp edges of who we are. The wild child learns to sit still, the dreamer learns to keep quiet, the rebel learns to hide. School arrives as the next hand tightening the knot. It does not care for the uniqueness of the mind, only for its ability to absorb and repeat. A child who questions is labeled difficult. A child who wanders is called distracted. There is no reward for the one who walks off the path, only correction, punishment, exclusion. Bit by bit, the inner voice dims, replaced by the chorus of the system. We learn not to listen to the body's whispers of fatigue or resistance. We override the instinct to pause, to rest, to wonder. Life becomes a race, with medals handed out for exhaustion, for overachievement, for becoming a perfect cog in a giant, invisible machine. Then the media steps in, adding color and sound to the gray outlines of control. Television, billboards, magazines, news feeds, all spinning the same web of desire and fear. You are too thin, too fat, too old, too plain. You need this cream, that car, this job, that vacation. Joy is a product, beauty is a standard, success is a number. And when the numbers are not enough, there is always comparison, always the endless scroll of people doing better, living brighter, shining harder. Social media becomes the arena where the battle for approval plays out. Likes, shares, comments, tiny doses of validation, tiny shocks of rejection. We craft an image, polish it, filter it, then wait. And when the waiting turns to hunger, we feed it more content, more perfection, more lies. All the while, the self slips further into the shadows, buried under the weight of performance. The system is not held together by force. It is held together by fear. Fear of failure, of rejection, of poverty, of loneliness. We are taught to fear standing alone, to fear being the outlier, the outsider, the one who says no. We are told that to be different is to be wrong, that to walk away is to be lost. The most powerful cage is the one whose walls we defend. It is in the home where the first seeds of compliance are planted. Be a good boy. Be a good girl. Don't make trouble. Do as you're told. It is in the classroom where we are ranked, measured, weighed. It is in the workplace where we learn that loyalty is rewarded, questioning is punished. It is in the streets, in the shops, in the screens we hold in our hands, where the message echoes over and over. Fall in line, keep up, stay busy. We chase after success that is defined for us. We reach for dreams that are handed to us, not born within us. The world points, and we run, not knowing that the race itself is the trap. Even rebellion is often packaged and sold back to us, turned into brands, slogans, trends. What looks like resistance becomes another form of control, another way to keep the machine humming. The system thrives on distraction. A distracted mind does not question. A busy mind does not revolt. A fearful mind does not break free. And so we are kept spinning, running, scrolling, consuming, too overwhelmed to stop, too anxious to sit still, too conditioned to wonder if any of it matters. But beneath the noise, beneath the endless motion, there is a quiet knowing. It stirs in moments of silence, in sleepless nights, in the stillness that we are taught to avoid. It whispers that something is off, that something is missing, that the life we live is a performance played to an audience we never chose. The matrix we are born into is not made of metal or wires. It is made of beliefs, of rules, of stories told so many times they become invisible. It is passed down in lullabies, in textbooks, in advertisements, in traditions. It is the air we breathe before we know there is air, the water we swim in before we know there is water. And because we cannot see it, we do not fight it. Because we cannot name it, we do not fear it. Yet every system has cracks. Every story has a flaw. And somewhere, within every person, is the faint memory of freedom. Not the freedom sold in slogans or promised in campaigns, but the freedom of simply being, without role, without script, without performance. That freedom waits, buried beneath layers of programming, waiting for the moment we are ready to see. The first step is not to run, not to rebel, but to notice, to see the patterns, the loops, the traps, to name the forces that shape us, to trace the threads that bind us. Only then can we begin to loosen the knot. Only then can we begin the long, slow work of unlearning. Freedom is not an escape from the world. It is an awakening within it. We are not born free. We are born into a design. But the design is not perfect, and those who dare to look, to question, to feel the discomfort of seeing the bars, they become the beginning of something new. The system does not fear violence or rebellion as much as it fears awareness. Because once enough eyes open, once enough hearts remember, the machine begins to stutter. The journey begins in the smallest act of defiance, the refusal to be numb, the decision to feel. To feel the ache of conformity, the grief of lost self, the longing for something true. That is where the invisible chains begin to crack. That is where the possibility of freedom is born. The most powerful chains are the ones wrapped around the mind. They slip in quietly, dressed as love, as duty, as ambition. They become the voice in the head that whispers, "You are not enough," and the pulse of anxiety that keeps the body restless. They shape the way we see the world, the way we see each other, the way we see ourselves, and we call them normal. From childhood, the subconscious is carved and molded. A parent's raised eyebrow teaches shame before words can explain it. A teacher's frown plants the seed of doubt. A friend's rejection cuts deep into the skin of belonging. These moments sink below the surface, weaving themselves into the nervous system, into the breath, into the bones. We begin to carry stories we do not remember writing. The subconscious holds a mirror up to the system. It is the place where control becomes self-control, where punishment becomes self-punishment. Long after the parent is gone, the child within still flinches. Long after the boss has left, the worker within still hurries. The mind learns to police itself, to guard its own prison. Advertising does not just sell products, it sells identities. It tells you who you are supposed to be, and then sells you the tools to become that image. It whispers that you are incomplete, but completion is just one purchase away. It links beauty with thinness, success with wealth, love with performance. And even when we know, on some level, that the promises are hollow, the subconscious absorbs the message. It turns it over and over until it feels like truth. Social media deepens the wound. It becomes the theater of comparison, the daily ritual of measuring self-worth against curated lives. We scroll not just for entertainment, but for validation. We seek connection and find competition. We perform, we pose, we polish. And beneath it all, the quiet ache grows. The subconscious drinks in the likes, the shares, the comments, until it forgets the difference between love and approval. Fear is the oldest tool of control. It lurks behind the longing for approval, the need for status, the hunger for safety. Fear of rejection keeps us compliant. Fear of poverty keeps us working. Fear of loneliness keeps us chasing. And the most dangerous fear of all, the fear of seeing clearly, keeps us asleep. To begin seeing the subconscious grip is to step into a dark room with a small candle. At first, the shapes are blurry, the outlines vague. But as the light grows, the familiar becomes strange. The roles we play, the beliefs we hold, the wounds we carry, all begin to reveal themselves as pieces of a larger design. The child who was never allowed to rest becomes the adult who cannot stop. The teenager who learned to hide feelings becomes the partner who cannot express love. The worker who was rewarded for overachievement becomes the leader who burns out his team. The past loops forward, pulling the strings of the present. We tell ourselves stories to survive. We say, "This is just how I am. This is just how life is." But beneath the stories lie choices we never made. Who taught us what love looks like? Who taught us what success means? Who decided what makes us valuable? The answers trace back to a system, a culture, a web of influence that has shaped us from the shadows. The subconscious does not care about logic. It responds to repetition, to emotion, to rhythm. And so the system repeats itself, in songs, in shows, in news feeds, in conversations. Over and over, the same messages, the same images, the same rewards. The brain learns to crave what it is fed. The body learns to tense in the face of disapproval. The heart learns to yearn for what is just out of reach. But there are moments when the pattern shudders, a loss, a crisis, a failure. These can crack the surface. Suddenly, the job that defined you is gone. The relationship that anchored you dissolves. The identity you built collapses. And in that collapse, something ancient stirs. A question long buried rises. Who am I beneath all this? The system counts on our silence. It counts on us smoothing the cracks, patching the holes, moving on. It feeds us distractions, quick fixes, numbing agents. But some wounds refuse to close. Some people refuse to forget. And it is in that refusal that awakening begins. Awakening is not a flash of enlightenment. It is a slow, aching process. It is the gradual peeling away of layer after layer of illusion. It is feeling the raw nerve of longing, the sharp edge of disillusionment. It is standing in the rubble of what you once believed and choosing not to rebuild the same walls. To awaken is to feel everything the system told you to avoid: the fear, the grief, the loneliness, the rage. It is to allow the pain that was buried, to hear the voice that was silenced, to see the chains that were made invisible. And as the feeling deepens, the grip of the subconscious begins to loosen. The subconscious does not release easily. It fights to hold on, to protect, to survive. But with each moment of awareness, with each breath of honesty, the old patterns weaken. The child within learns to rest. The adult learns to speak. The worker learns to step back. And in these small, quiet acts, the system begins to lose its hold. Freedom is not a destination. It is a practice. It is the daily choice to notice, to question, to feel. It is the willingness to stand apart, to stand alone, to stand in truth. It is the courage to face the discomfort of unlearning, the patience to rebuild from the inside out. The subconscious grip is powerful because it hides, but the light of awareness is patient. It does not rush, does not force, does not shatter. It softens, it seeps, it whispers, and over time, it transforms. Beneath the noise, beneath the programming, beneath the fear, there is a stillness. In that stillness, the self waits. The self untouched by approval, by comparison, by control. The work of awakening is the work of returning to that self. And once that return begins, the world can never hold you in quite the same way again. There comes a moment when the walls begin to crack. For some, it arrives like a storm: the loss of a job, the death of a loved one, the collapse of a relationship. For others, it creeps in slowly, like a quiet erosion from within, a growing sense of emptiness, a fatigue that no sleep can cure, a restlessness that no distraction can silence. This is the breaking point, not the end, but the beginning. At first, the system teaches us to resist the breaking. We are told to stay strong, to push through, to numb the pain with work, with shopping, with screens, with noise. But for some, the old strategies stop working. The mask slips, the performance stumbles, and in the silence that follows, something stirs. The awakening begins when the question rises uninvited: whose life have I been living? It is not a gentle question. It cuts through the surface, slices into the carefully built layers of identity. It shakes the foundations we thought were solid. The house of cards begins to tremble. Imagine a man who has spent decades climbing the ladder, only to find it leaned against the wrong wall. He has the title, the house, the reputation, but in the quiet of the night, he feels the ache of disconnection. Or the woman who has fulfilled every expectation, been the perfect daughter, the perfect wife, the perfect mother, yet feels an emptiness she cannot explain. These are the moments when the spell of the system begins to fade. The pain of awakening is the pain of honesty. It is the moment when we stop pretending, when we let the old stories collapse. We begin to see the cost of compliance, the price we paid to fit in, the parts of ourselves we abandoned to belong. There is grief in this reckoning, but also a strange, wild freedom. With the collapse comes space. For the first time, there is room to breathe, to feel, to listen. We begin to hear the voice we buried long ago, the voice that whispers of longing, of creativity, of truth. We feel the pull toward something real, something alive, something that cannot be measured in likes or promotions or paychecks. The system fears this space. It rushes to fill it with new distractions, new demands, new promises. But those who have tasted the emptiness know that nothing less than authenticity will satisfy. They begin to pull away, to simplify, to turn inward. They begin the quiet, radical work of reclaiming themselves. Awakening is not a rebellion against the world. It is a return to what was always there, waiting beneath the noise. It is remembering the simplicity of presence, the joy of connection, the power of honesty. It is the decision to stop running, to stop performing, to stop pleasing. It is the choice to stand still and face the truth. In this stillness, something remarkable happens. The chains begin to loosen, not because the system has changed, but because the grip of fear weakens. The fear of rejection, of failure, of not being enough. It begins to dissolve in the light of awareness. What remains is not a perfect person, but a real one. There is no map for this journey, no formula, no checklist, no guaranteed outcome. Each person must walk their own path, guided by their own questions, their own longings, their own pain. But what unites those who awaken is a shared recognition. The old life no longer fits, and the new life cannot be found in the old ways. The breaking point is not a defeat. It is an initiation. It is the moment when we are invited to step out of the script and into the unknown. It is terrifying, yes, but it is also sacred, because only in the unknown can we meet ourselves as we truly are. As we shed the layers of conditioning, we begin to see with new eyes. We notice the beauty in simplicity, the depth in ordinary moments, the richness in connection. We discover that freedom is not about escaping the world, but about inhabiting it fully, without the need for approval or control. There will be moments of doubt, moments of loneliness, moments of longing to return to the familiar prison. But something in us has shifted, something irreversible. We have glimpsed the truth, and the truth calls us forward. It calls us to live with integrity, to love without conditions, to create without fear. The awakening is not a destination. It is a practice, a path, a way of being. It is the slow, patient work of unlearning and remembering. It is the art of becoming fully human in a world that teaches us to be machines. And so, the breaking point becomes the birthplace. The collapse becomes the opening. The pain becomes the teacher. We stand at the edge of the known, trembling, uncertain, but alive. And in that aliveness, we begin to taste a freedom no system can give, and no system can take away. Freedom does not arrive like a lightning strike. It comes quietly, in the smallest acts of defiance against a world that tells us who to be. It begins when we stop apologizing for needing rest, when we step away from the noise, when we choose presence over performance. It begins when we notice the moments we say yes out of fear, and slowly, trembling, begin to say no. The system relies on our exhaustion. It thrives when we are too busy, too anxious, too distracted to question the script. But when we pause, when we turn inward, when we listen, we start to feel the texture of the chains around us. We notice how often we betray ourselves to keep the peace, how often we shrink to fit into spaces too small for who we are. Imagine a man who begins to leave his phone in another room, who takes slow walks without music in his ears, who sits in silence even when it makes him restless. Imagine a woman who lets herself say no without explanation, who allows herself to be seen without makeup, who gives herself permission to fail. These are small revolutions, but they carry the weight of freedom. Breaking the chains is not about abandoning the world. It is about changing the relationship we have with it. It is about waking up inside the life we already live and daring to meet it without armor. It is about letting go of the need to prove, to impress, to dominate. It is about choosing depth over speed, meaning over approval, truth over comfort. There will be resistance. The world does not like when people stop playing the game. It will call you selfish, lazy, rebellious, strange. It will tempt you back with promises of reward and threats of rejection. But every act of honesty strengthens the muscle of freedom. Every moment you choose integrity over image carves a new path in the mind, a path away from control and toward sovereignty. The journey is deeply personal, but it is never private. When one person wakes up, they become a mirror for others. Their presence speaks a language beyond words, a language that says, "There is another way." And slowly, like a quiet revolution, the awakening spreads. The system teaches us that worth is measured in productivity, in beauty, in popularity, but freedom teaches us that worth is inherent, unearned, untouchable. It is the soft power of being fully alive, fully human, fully present. It is the audacity to be yourself in a world invested in making you someone else. To break the chains, we must unlearn the lessons of separation. We must remember that we are not machines, not brands, not commodities. We are not here to compete or compare or conquer. We are here to connect, to create, to feel, to love. We are here to bring the unseen into the world, to offer what only we can give. There will be grief in this process. Grief for the years lost to pretending. Grief for the masks we wore so long they became skin. There will be anger, too. Anger at the systems that shaped us, at the voices that silenced us, at the cages we defended. But beneath the grief and anger, there is always joy. Joy in reclaiming the self, in rediscovering what was never truly lost. Freedom does not mean the absence of fear. It means moving through fear with eyes open. It means dancing with uncertainty, embracing vulnerability, allowing imperfection. It means holding space for paradox, for the truth that we are both fragile and strong, both broken and whole, both longing and fulfilled. As we break the chains, we begin to see the world differently. We see how much of it is built on illusion, how many of its rules are arbitrary, how many of its battles are distractions. We see the games of status and power for what they are, empty performances masking deeper hunger, and we begin to ask, what really matters? What is worth my life, my time, my heart? The path of freedom is not glamorous. It is not made of grand gestures or dramatic exits. It is made of daily choices, quiet courage, patient practice. It is the decision to stay awake when it would be easier to numb out, to stay soft when it would be easier to harden, to stay open when it would be easier to close. Freedom lives in the body. It is felt in the breath that deepens, in the shoulders that soften, in the heart that begins to trust its own rhythm. It is known in the moments when we speak the unspeakable truth, when we take the risk of being seen, when we dare to belong to ourselves. There is no end point to this journey. There is only deepening, only widening, only the unfolding of more and more aliveness. The chains fall away, not all at once, but piece by piece, as we remember who we are beneath the noise, beneath the masks, beneath the fear. And as we remember, we become free, not because the world has changed, but because we have. Not because the system has fallen, but because its hold on us has weakened. Not because we have escaped, but because we have come home. Freedom does not end with escape. It comes full circle in the return to the same world, the same streets, the same faces, but with new eyes. It is easy to dream of running away, of finding a quiet place where the noise fades, where the system cannot reach. But the deeper work is to stay, to stand in the center of the storm and remain free. The journey inward brings us back outward, but changed. We no longer move as puppets pulled by invisible strings. We walk with a kind of quiet clarity, no longer desperate for approval, no longer starving for recognition. The same streets are now just streets, the same faces just faces. They no longer carry the weight of judgment, no longer shape the self we carry inside. This return is where the real strength is tested. It is one thing to awaken in solitude, in silence, in retreat. It is another to bring that awakening into the noise of the everyday, into the demands of work, family, society, Here, the old patterns will call, the old roles will beckon, but something has shifted. The core has been touched. The self has been remembered. In this return, we begin to live not as products of the system, but as creators within it. We bring presence to the smallest moments, to the coffee poured in the morning, to the conversation with a stranger, to the hand reaching for another's. We bring softness where there was hardness, curiosity where there was defense, compassion where there was judgment. The system has no defense against this kind of presence. It can control bodies, measure output, track data, but it cannot touch the quiet power of a human being who is fully here, fully alive, fully free inside. That is the paradox the system fears most. A person who participates but is not possessed, who engages but is not enslaved. This freedom is not about perfection. It does not mean we never fall, never falter, never forget. It means we return, again and again, to the truth we have touched. We fall asleep. We wake up. We get lost. We remember. We break. We mend. And each time we return a little more whole, a little more human. We begin to see others through softer eyes. We see the masks they wear, the chains they carry, the exhaustion behind their smiles. We no longer need to judge, to compete, to compare. We can hold space for their struggle, even as we hold fast to our own awakening. We become quiet beacons, reminders that another way is possible. There is humility in this freedom. It knows its own limits, its own blind spots. It does not boast, does not preach, does not conquer. It moves like water, gentle and persistent, reshaping the landscape not with force, but with presence. It touches without grabbing, offers without demanding, gives without taking. Freedom also brings grief. Grief for the years lost to illusion, grief for the world still asleep, grief for the pain that awakening brings. But this grief is clean, not bitter. It softens the heart, deepens the gaze, opens the hands. It makes room for joy. And the joy is quiet, but fierce. It is the joy of breath, of belonging, of being. It is the joy of knowing that you have touched something real, something that cannot be marketed, bought, or sold. It is the joy of knowing you are no longer running, no longer hiding, no longer hungry for what cannot satisfy. The return home is the final act of awakening, to stand in the middle of the world, among noise, distraction, expectation, and stay true to the self. To walk through the marketplace with a still heart, to speak the truth without the sharp edge of anger, to love without clinging, to give without losing oneself. The system survives on the belief that we cannot change, but each person who wakes up is proof that we can. Each person who loosens the chains in their own life becomes a crack in the wall, a light in the dark, a thread that pulls at the whole tapestry. We will still stumble, we will still forget, but something unshakable has been planted. And from that seed, a different kind of life begins to grow, one not ruled by fear or driven by lack, but rooted in presence, in connection, in love. The invisible chains were never unbreakable. They only needed to be seen, and once seen, they begin to loosen. Once loosened, they begin to fall. And when they fall, we find ourselves standing not in a new world, but in the same world, finally awake, finally home. And so the journey settles into something simple, something steady. No more chasing, no more pretending, no more waiting for permission to be alive. Freedom begins to weave itself into the quiet hours, into the pauses between words, into the spaces where we once filled every silence with noise. We carry this freedom into our work, into our love, into our solitude. We meet the world not with a shield, but with an open palm. We no longer need to prove, to conquer, to win. We have nothing left to earn, only something true to share. The system still spins around us, still tempts, still pulls, but it no longer owns us. We walk through its streets, but we do not bow. We hear its voices, but they do not command. We remember who we are, and in that remembering, the world itself begins to change. This is the quiet revolution. This is what it means to come home. We're sure you've discovered plenty of value, so subscribe now and stay connected.